Good morning and a very warm welcome to this morning's webinar, Community and Dementia, Creating Better Lives in Tayside. My name is Robert Hamilton and I'm very pleased to be co-hosting this conference today. I was a sales manager before I retired and was diagnosed with early onset dementia 18 months ago. I am at present a worship leader in the Scottish Episcopal Church and a board member of Kirrie Connections.
Hello, my name is George Grindlay, and I'm also delighted to be co-hosting today's conference with Robert. My experience of dementia is as an unpaid carer for my wife Chris, who was diagnosed with early signs of dementia around 3 years ago. Heather Edwards from the Care Inspectorate will also be joining us to chair the Q&A panel session later on this morning.
Today's event is one in a series of Creating Better Lives regional events the Life Changes Trust has been running since 2018. So far, they have visited Highland, Grampian, Orkney, the Western Isles, Ayrshire and Arran, Edinburgh, and the Lothians, and most recently, Fife.
For each of these events, the Life Changes Trust worked in partnership with local stakeholders, people living with dementia and unpaid carers of people who have dementia, as well as others in the community who support individuals, families, or projects. These partnerships help with the planning and development of each event so that they are meaningful to local communities and led by the communities themselves.
For the last few months, the Trust has been working in partnership with individuals and organisations from across Tayside to design this conference. From this work, the Trust has been learning about what matters to people living in Tayside who have dementia or unpaid carers or who provide support. For instance, what are the gaps in services and provision? What have been the struggles during the COVID pandemic and what has worked well? And what do people living with dementia and unpaid carers say is most important to them?
These events are designed to help support local areas and all of us to think about how communities can uphold the human rights of people with dementia and unpaid carers. Before we run through the programme for today, we just have a few housekeeping points. There is a 10-minute break scheduled in the programme, but if you feel you need a little more time away from your screen, please feel free to do so. This webinar is being recorded and will be on the Life Changes Trust website in due course, so you can catch up then if you miss anything. You will also be notified by email when it's available.
During the webinar, if you would like to ask the question of the speakers or the panel, then please feel free to do so. You can put the questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. There is also a chat section. This is for you if you have any general comments.
You will see in the chat function on your screen, there's a drop-down menu. This gives you the option to share your comments with just the panel or with everyone. It's always nice to share the everyone, so please remember to select the with everyone option. Thank you for bearing with us. So now on to today's event.
During the course of the morning, we will be seeing some films and hearing from local projects and individuals from across Tayside. They will highlight the work they are continuing to deliver and the support they are continuing to provide during COVID. We will be hearing about the meeting centre's approach to dementia, where local person-centred support is provided in the community hub. Dr. Shirley Evans from Worcester University will explain a bit more about meeting centres in general. And we'll hear from Graham Galloway from Kirrie Connections, who will tell us about their amazing meeting centre in Kirrie in Angus.
You'll also hear from Sheila Pilgrim, who is a support worker with Perth and Kinross Association of Voluntary Services, and Tracy Chisholm from the New Rannoch Day Centre in Perth. They'll be talking about how they have been delivering services to support people with dementia and unpaid carers during the challenges of COVID, and how they've adapted to outreach work and virtual delivery.
We will also be sharing what people in Tayside say are their priorities in their own communities. These priorities have emerged through a number of storytelling sessions that the Trust has been running over the last few weeks. More of that later.
So we've got lots to get through today. And of course, there'll also be time to ask any questions you may have in our Q&A section later this morning. But first, let's get started with a short film entitled Reframing Dementia, which tells the story of the Kirrie Hub Camera Club. In 2019, members of Kirrie Connections collaborated with a photographer and composer to explore their experiences of dementia through photography and the spoken word. This story is told through the eyes, or should I say the lens, of my wife, Chris Grindlay, and Scott Lyon, both of whom have a diagnosis of dementia. I'll let them tell you more.
Hi, my name is Chris, and I would like to tell you about the story and my experiences of Kirrie Hub Camera Club. That's a long-winded tale, but you'll understand when you see the pictures. The Camera Club is the most amazing, amazing project ever. It really is. You learn so much about yourself. You learn that you are a stronger person than you thought you were. And you make more and more memories that you thought you'd forgotten.
I used to be really good at counting. I can't, there was something wrong. Man, I was no counting right and nothing down. I was able to count numbers like hell when I went clean.
When were you first diagnosed with dementia?
In November last year.
November last year.
So we sent him up to Stracathro. And it came back, he's got cerebral atrophy.
I did laugh at that bird's eye view though. I thought that was hysterical. And she says, "You go in a minute." I thought, "No, I won't."
I can just see you leaning over with the camera over this cliff.
You've taken quite a lot of photographs from this window, I've noticed.
This is what he sees when he's sitting here, so he's been taking photos.
And that's how I thought, can take a photo of a couple of things on TV, because it was different.
They mean so much to me, these stories. The ones that I've picked up on my journeys, right? But they're all different. I like that one there in the middle, that's bethought. So you can actually heat that.
It's just, when you see colour and things, can you can do a lot with colour.
Yeah, colour's good for you.
Can see him just looking at sweet peas and seeing how the bonny colour, purpley blue, and I can like pastel colours or something like.
When they diagnosed me as having early onset dementia, I was nearly demented to think about it like that. I never thought it would hit me. Senility, as they used to call it. And even, okay, I'm no old like, well, that sounds really nasty. it's not quite as old as some people with dementia. And that's not a nice thing to say. It hits everyone and anyone.
How has this project made you feel working with a camera and kind of going out and...
Great.
Yeah.
Honestly, great. It's gave us a wee bit of a life. I'm not stuck in here, stressed out and pissed off.
It shows you just what you can do and just how positive you can be within an illness that you would never, ever expect to have, ever.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Chris and Scott, for demonstrating how powerful it is to be able to tell your own story or express your own feelings through photography. So let's move on to our next section, which is all about local priorities. In a few moments, we are going to hear from Shona Cowie from the Village Storytelling Centre. They've been running sessions with people in Tayside to find out what is most important to them in their communities and what their priorities are for creating better lives. These sessions are called storytelling sessions, and they work by using creative methods to support people and tell their story. Storytelling is simply a gentle, practical way to do this. Shona will tell us more about these sessions and what came out of them. But let's find out more about how storytelling actually works. At the Trust's Creating Better Lives conference in Ayrshire and Arran, Sam Rowe from the Village Storytelling Centre explained.
Good morning, everybody. I'm not Arlene, I am Sam, you might notice that. I work for an organisation called the Village Storytelling Centre, and over the last year we've been working with the Life Changes Trust to develop this storytelling approach, which you might have heard being talked about. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about the process that has led us to the priorities that you'll find on your table. We are an organisation that uses storytelling to support communities to find their voice. We've been working in collaboration with another storyteller called Claire Hewitt, who has a background in the Living Voices project, which worked in care homes across Scotland, gathering stories from the residents there. Our workshops, which we've been instigating, they normally begin by gathering everyone together, and we always start off with a song and a traditional story. And that just gives a feeling for, this is a different kind of meeting. Claire put it really nicely, I think, when she said people think they're coming to a meeting, and what we try to create is the atmosphere of gathering around a kitchen table just to share. But that story will often have thematic connections to some of the concerns that the group might be carrying, and we'll use that story then to kind of start off leading the conversation. It might be a story about building relationships, or it might be a story about community or supportive society, and we'll let the kind of ball start rolling with that. So it kind of starts the conversation off from a kind of different and unusual place. Sometimes that conversation is enough. Sometimes people have come to that meeting kind of with a lot that they wish to share, and we just kind of give them the space to speak and to listen. But also we have the option to kind of like move into a next stage, which is to actually use a story creating process to support people to share some of their thoughts and feelings. And that normally revolves around creation of a character. So if we're working with a group of carers, we might create a fictionalized character who shares some of their experiences, who we could imagine being a member of the group that we're sitting in. And that character gives people the space to kind of project onto it, onto him or her, some of their own experiences, which gives them the chance to regulate their own level of personal disclosure, but also find the space perhaps to share some things that they might find painful to kind of like to talk about if there was too much personal focus. So for example, in another area, we talked about family conflict. So I don't know if that was happening in the participants' lives, but by being able to talk about this character, we were able to really explore those issues in a really open and kind of supportive manner. The other approach that we might use then is also to kind of introduce an overnight bag that belongs to a person perhaps living with dementia. And in that bag, there'll be all sorts of thematic objects that we've picked up from the previous discussions that we've had. And we'll pass those around the participants and ask them to talk about those and what it might mean to this character who owns this bag. So that might include doctor's letters or a driver's license, which is now out of date, or a set of keys. We might ask who helped pack that bag. And that gives people the space, again, to just sort of talk about some of the things that they have been, that are important to them through the prism of this fictionalized storytelling process. We listen to all these conversations, and then we distill down what we hear into the priorities kind of afterwards, working along with the trust itself. And then obviously this is handed on to you at the conference. And this is the first time I've been able to attend the conference, so I'm really excited to see this next part of the process and how all we've discussed over the last couple of days is going to go forwards, and just to hear your discussions.
Well, thanks to Sam Rowe for telling us how storytelling works so that people can tell their own story and have their own voices heard. As we mentioned earlier, these sessions have now been running in Tayside. After these sessions, all of the conversations and stories are distilled down into a set of local priorities based on what people have told us. I'm going to hand over now to Shona Cowie from the Village Storytelling Centre to tell us more. Welcome, Shona.
Thank you, Robert, and hello, everybody. Thanks for allowing me to speak with you today. So yes, I'm Shona. I'm the storyteller who's leading this side of the project at the moment, and it's been a huge privilege to be able to hear the voices and hear the stories of people that are living with dementia for themselves or in their work and in their lives. This is an ambitious project that we're undertaking. We have set ourselves the challenge to make sure that the voices of people experiencing dementia from all over the country in every NHS Health Board area are heard, and that priorities are put forward. And we're not going to miss Tayside, because we unfortunately weren't able to speak to anyone who has a dementia diagnosis as part of the storytelling workshops. The sessions were set up, but it wasn't able to happen. We did speak to unpaid carers and professionals and volunteers though. And so this is a bit of a call to action for you, because we will reschedule these sessions. So keep an eye out for an online session for people with dementia and opportunities to have telephone one-on-one conversations through storytelling to gather the voices of people that are experiencing dementia. Yeah, we will need your help to make sure that these people are at the heart of decisions and discussions about our lives, about their lives. So we use storytelling because we believe it's a really powerful tool to help support better communication. And I'll just expand a little bit on what Sam said. In the sessions, we use 3 types of storytelling. We use fictional storytelling. Now that's what you imagine, myths and legends, traditional folk tales, or stories that feel like they're from a different time. Fishermen's stories and farmers' stories. And the purpose of these, even though at first they may feel not relevant to our lives right now, they all exist for a reason. So for example, dragons. At first we may think they have nothing to do with our experiences, but actually the character, the figure of a dragon evolved to help societies explore their collective fears. And similarly with fairy tales, which is a big thing in Scotland, a lot of fairy tales and fairy stories developed simultaneously with child mortality rates. This was a way that we could explore that grief separately and with a bit of distance and a bit of protection. And more modern times, we can see J.K. Rowling decided to create Dementors for her to be able to express her experiences with depression. So I'm wondering what already exists, what expression of dementia can we find in our folklore and in our mythical creatures, or is it time that we create one to offer us a vessel through which to express our experiences and individuals' experiences? So that's fictional narrative. The other type that we use is personal narrative. So that's anecdotes, autobiography, chit chat. This is day-to-day stuff. This is how we all communicate all the time. And it's really powerful. It's really important that we have a chance to be heard and that we have a chance to share. And we also learn to listen. This is a really important part of our practice. And the third type of storytelling is one step removed. So this is what Sam was describing, when it feels like a true story. The character that we create could be anyone that we know. It could be a friend, or it could be somebody that we work with, but the person's not real. And by creating that fiction, just that level or that distance, we're able to explore things in a deeper way. You understand if I say, if I ask a participant to discuss the most distressing moment of their lives right now, that's not appropriate and it's very intense. But I can say, what might Bob be facing right now? What is distressing Bob? And just with that separation, we're able to go into what could be distressing someone in that situation in a much more deep and profound way. And I think it's important to say that stories are all around us, and that's not an airy-fairy thing. When we think about the past and we think about memory, it's completely subjective. We base our understanding of memory in the past on a constructive narrative of the most likely set of circumstances. It's not happening now. It's not real anymore. It's a story. And similarly, the future doesn't exist yet. And we need an extraordinary amount of imagination in order to imagine the simplest things, such as what we're going to have for lunch later. This is an incredibly creative skill. So the future, it doesn't exist yet. It's also story. It's also constructed narrative and imagination. So we exist in the present, real now, but the past is imagined in story and the future is imagined in story. And I think we can build skills in storytelling and creativity and imagination. We need to, in order to be able to imagine something more positive and create better lives. So if yourself or if anyone you know might be interested in joining our sessions for people with dementia, come along. It will be with me probably, or one of my colleagues at the Storytelling Centre, and we'll have a lovely time, a great chat, and we'll explore some stories together. I'm going to move on now to talk about the care list. So this is a list that we've been compiling across the sessions all over the country. And we've simply been asking people to, in that moment, list what care means to them. And it builds a picture across the country. So this is what care means to people in Tayside. Care is about respect, dignity, ensuring the person has their basic needs met. Care is having company, it's social, emotional, and physical. It's acknowledging individuals' likes and dislikes, ensuring that voices are heard, acknowledging their values and beliefs, providing a comfortable space. It's about maintaining relationships. Care is working in partnership with the person, not taking things at face value, a smile, being inventive and thinking outside the box, spending time with people one-to-one, going for a walk, seeing how they respond. Care is here and now. Care is a team effort. It's seeing the birds and the trees. Care is choice. Care is unique. And care is safe. Care is empathy, it's practical listening, willingness to help and engage. Care is ideas, activities and resources. It's trust, ability to be vulnerable. Care is patience, it is love. Care is open and honest. Care is respectful of boundaries. Care is exhausting. Care is knowledge of the person. Care is relevant. We're going to move on to the priorities now. So just bear with me a moment while I share my screen. Here we are. So the priorities which emerged from the storytelling sessions are as follows. There is a real need to personalise care. Individual stories can help carers, move my own face. I wonder if I can get rid of that. There we go. To better understand the unique needs of each person. However, being able to provide such care and support is complicated by services and approaches to working that may be disjointed at times, or by not taking into consideration the views of those closest to the person living with dementia. People aren't always looking for an answer. Sometimes you also just need to be able to say you'll go away and think about it. Sometimes the same answers are being rolled out time and time again without really listening to the needs of individuals. We've been through many times. We've been through many times where we've had some support that is not relevant, and it doesn't help. If they receive care that it is relevant, then you, as the carer, feel supported. Priority 2. A one-size-fits-all approach is being rolled out, partly because of a lack of time and space to foster relationships and partnerships that allow for a personalised approach. There is often a return to the top-down structures of organisations or of decision-making processes. Care, support and risk assessment needs to be done together with the carers and managers and those with dementia. It's about partnerships. Priority 3. Many carers have feelings of disconnection and isolation which have been exacerbated during the pandemic. It is frustrating that very often it is not until you're at the point of crisis that support is offered. There needs to be some more support offered earlier to prevent this from being the case. The majority of carers do not get any kind of help. It was not until I went through a crisis that I got any support, and we must aim to provide this before someone gets to that point. Priority 4. It can be very difficult to find the support and guidance needed. What is most valuable is hearing from other unpaid carers, but there are not many opportunities for this. While the pandemic has been tough, online networks were felt to be effective. More of these kinds of networks and opportunities could be offered in the future. I was telling a friend about a situation, and their response was to just roar with laughter, and that was great. That really helped. Priority 5. Volunteers and staff working with people often have their own care needs, and at the moment, there are many times that this is compromised, especially when working from home without much social contact. How can we provide care when we ourselves are not receiving it? And that's the end. So I'll unshare my screen again. Thank you. Brilliant. So as I said, these priorities emerged from discussions with unpaid carers and staff and volunteers working with people with dementia. So we really need to make sure that we get the voices of people who are living with dementia themselves at the heart of this conversation. At the same time, a lot of these priorities are transferable. A lot of them are about human connection and the needs that the holistic needs we have as humans to be seen and heard and share experiences and access knowledge. So there's a lot we can take from them regardless. But I really look forward to hopefully working with some of the people that you support or you yourself in the near future. I'll hand back over to George now. Thanks again. Bye.
Many thanks to Shona. That was really important to hear. Our next section will focus on some local projects and take a look at how they have traditionally been supporting people living with dementia and unpaid carers in Tayside, how they have adapted during the COVID pandemic, and how they are planning for the future. First, we are going to hear about the Meeting Centre's approach to dementia. Meeting centres are a local resource operating out of ordinary community buildings, which offer ongoing support to people with mild to moderate dementia and their families. At the heart of the Meeting Centre is a social club where people meet to talk to others, have fun, and get help that focuses on what they need. The meeting centres help people to cope in adjusting to living with the symptoms and changes that dementia brings. To tell us more, we're going to hear from Dr. Shirley Evans from Worcester University, who will explain a bit more about what meeting centres actually are. And then Graham Galloway from Kirrie Connections will talk about how they have created the first meeting centre in Scotland. So first, over to Shirley.
Hello there, my name is Dr. Shirley Evans and I'm Programme Manager for the UK Meeting Centre's Community Support Programme. This is led by the Association for Dementia Studies at the University of Worcester. I'm also a trustee of Leinster Meeting Centre, which has been running for almost 5 years now. We're located in Herefordshire on the Welsh borders, and it is my absolute passion. I spend a lot of my spare time helping to raise money for the centre. The Association for Dementia Studies at the University of Worcester has been involved with meeting centres since 2014, so for 7 years now, and that's what I've been working on. We were part of a European project called Meeting Dem, and we worked with partners from the Netherlands, Poland and Italy. And the aim was to see whether the Dutch model of meeting centres could be implemented in the UK, Poland and Italy, and whether we could experience the same benefits that they benefited from, and that was found to be the case. Meeting centres have started in the Netherlands in the early 1990s, and there are now over 175 meeting centres in the Netherlands and 200 worldwide. At the association, we have funding from the National Lottery Community Fund with a key aim of setting up 15 to 20 new centres in the UK, which is what I work on a day-to-day basis. And that's just a photograph of our meeting centre in Leinster just towards the end of last year. As you can see, we're physically distanced there, but we have been able to be open since August the 4th last year with reduced numbers. Hopefully we're moving out of that now. So you might be asking, what is a meeting centre? Well, a meeting centre is for people with mild to moderate dementia who live at home in the community, and is very, very inclusive and friendly with a focus on both the person with dementia and the family carer. It's very much about helping both to adapt and adjust well to living with dementia, and it's underpinned by something called the adaptation and coping model. It is really a social club, generally open 3 days a week for around about 5 hours, although some meeting centres might be open for 1 day. And the main thing is that there is regular and ongoing support. And it's very, very local, accessible with no us and them, a very ordinary life setting. So if you went into Leinster Meeting Centre, or indeed Kirrie Connections, you go in, you wouldn't necessarily know who had dementia, who was a family carer, who was staff, who were volunteers. Meeting centres generally support 16 to 20 people a day, plus family. So around about 60 people over the course of a year, but some meeting centres might be quite a bit smaller. It depends on the sort of population where they're located. Another key aspect is very much around ongoing collaboration between local stakeholders, which are called a planning group when we're setting up, both in the planning and the implementation stages. So it's about involving all the key stakeholders, making sure you're not duplicating anything that's already there, and everybody knows what's available in the community. And activities are very wide-ranging and determined by the needs and aspirations of the members, with everyone contributing in some way. Generally staffed by a centre manager, support workers and volunteers, although a couple of the meeting centres are run entirely by volunteers. Very much outreach into the local community. Is not about shutting the door and there's the meeting centre and there's the local community. A two-way process going on there. And there's research evidence based dating back nearly 20 years. So there's very good evidence from both the Dutch research and our more recent UK research that people attending meeting centres experience better self-esteem and a greater feelings of happiness and belonging compared with those who don't attend. Those who attend most regularly show fewer of the more distressing symptoms of dementia and a greater feeling of support, as do family carers. And people with dementia and family carers feel experience high levels of satisfaction with the programme, seeing it as a very important way of keeping active and feeling supported. And also those attending meeting centres were able to stay at home 6 months longer than those attending usual care. So there was that delay in going into residential care. What is different, the same as other initiatives, is you might be thinking, oh, well, such and such initiative, we do that, we do some of those, we do that, or perhaps we do all of the things at a meeting centre. I think it's more this sort of combination of aspects and this overall ethos that you can only really feel, not define, when you actually walk into the meeting centre, that it's driven by people's interests, that it is for people with dementia and family carers, that it's very community-based, and there's this aspect of socialisation, very much eating together, and coordination and movement play key roles there. And this underpinning of the adaptation coping model, supporting people to adjust to their changing situation. So with the UK Meeting Support Programme, what we can offer is one-to-one consultation, support to organise a community engagement event, linking people up with similar initiatives and arranging visits to existing meeting centres, access to a community of learning and practice, ongoing development of a range of resources such as a guidebook, self-assessment tools, and very importantly, training and access to a help desk. And as is mentioned, this ongoing support so that meeting centres don't feel that they're on their own. And I'd like to hand over now to my colleague Graham Galloway, who will talk about meeting centres in Scotland. Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley. My name is Graham Galloway. I'm the Chief Officer of Kirrie Connections. Kirrie Connections is a dementia support charity based in the Angus town of Kirrie. We were formed originally in 2015, originally as a dementia-friendly community initiative, with funding from the Life Changes Trust. However, in around 2017, I first read about the meeting centre model. And it was at that point that I got in touch with Shirley and her team at Worcester to chat about it and to see if there was anything we could do around the model in Kirrie, as it really was, I felt, a fantastic match to build on the work we were already doing. So for most of 2018, we formed a working group to look at how we could adapt and use the model in Kirrie. And then in May 2019, we officially opened as the first meeting centre in Scotland. And here you can see Cabinet Secretary for Health, Jean Freeman, with one of our members cutting the ribbon there at that opening ceremony. So Shirley's talked a bit about the theory and the research and the evidence behind meeting centres. I'd like to talk just a little bit about the practice and what they look like in reality, and in reality here in Angus, in Kirrie. So as Shirley said, it's very much a social club where people living with dementia and their families, their loved ones and their carers can come and get together and take part in meaningful and stimulating social activities. As you can see here, we have a really strong focus on creative activities at Kirrie Connections. That's one of the things we love to do and our members love to take part in. We're really fortunate in that we have some incredible local practitioners that we work with. You can see in the picture here, Christine Kidd, who is a local musician and also a renowned trad music artist. She was actually inducted into the Trad Music Hall of Fame a few years ago. So we're incredibly lucky to have her with us in Kirrie Connections. And Christine runs our community choir, but she also runs various projects with us as well, including one called Orlang, which is a music and crafts-based project that she runs with another local practitioner, the artist Maureen Crosby. So, as Shirley said, an average day at the meeting centre, if there is such a thing as an average day, I don't think there is, to be honest. Each day varies enormously, but people will come to us around 10 o'clock. And they'll stay till 3, 4 o'clock and spend the whole day with us. And again, as Shirley mentioned, one of the really key things of that process is lunchtime. So discussing what we're going to have for lunch, discussing recipes, favourite foods, going out to the shop, buying it, coming back, preparing it, eating it, obviously, it's very, very important, and then cleaning up. And all these tasks are done together. It's very, very egalitarian model. And as Shirley said, there's no us and them. And our point about walking into a meeting centre, not knowing who the person with dementia was and who the staff member, the volunteer was, is something that really is very evident in Kirrie Connections. So that was a little bit about how we worked before COVID happened. Obviously, the past year has meant we've had to completely rethink the model. Meeting centres are very much about personal contact, face-to-face contact, and we haven't been able to do that for most of this year, unfortunately. So we have obviously been working remotely for most of the past year. We have managed to secure funding to get devices out to people that weren't digitally connected. And we're now running several different groups and one-to-one sessions over Zoom, but also over the telephone. And one of the most successful things we've done over the past year actually is our hard copy newsletters that we send out. And we now send out 4 different newsletters, ranging from arts and crafts packs through to a song sheet for our singing group, and also a farming memory newsletter, which is written with the assistance of a local farmer. So it's another great example of that community aspect of meeting centres that's come together in these newsletters, where our members, our family members, and the wider community is all inputting into these resources that are going out to people. One of the perhaps crazy decisions we took during lockdown was to buy our own building. So looking into the future, this is really where Kirrie Connections is going to be from now on. We picked up the keys to this building just at the end of January, and we're now in the process of hopefully within the next few weeks starting building work to convert it into our new meeting centre. I've just got the exterior picture here. You can see the outside is currently mostly car park, tarmacked. We plan to turn the not the majority, but a large amount of that space into a new garden. That again won't be just for Kirrie Connections, it will be a garden the whole community can come and use to take part in. So looking beyond Kirriemuir, meeting centres are starting to develop all over Scotland now. And Kirrie Connections is involved in helping to support them through the meeting centre support programme that Shirley spoke about. And you can see now we have interest all the way from Orkney down to Peebles, really the entire length and breadth of the country. So it's a really, really exciting time for meeting centres just now. And if anybody is interested in finding out more, please feel free to get in touch. I'm sure either myself or Shirley would be very happy to speak to you. Thanks a lot.
Many thanks to Graham Galloway and Dr. Shirley Evans. A very interesting look at how meeting centres can play such a big part in ensuring that people living with dementia are connected, empowered, and have the right support. We are now going to hear about more local projects here in Tayside. We'll hear from Sheila Pilgrim, who is a support worker with Perth and Kinross Association of Voluntary Services. She will talk about the challenges faced by carers of those living with the diagnosis of dementia and about how they have managed to provide support during COVID. But first we will hear from Tracy Chisholm, who is the Deputy Manager at the new Rannoch Day Centre in Perth. Tracy will tell us a bit about how they have adapted to outreach work and virtual delivery. Over to you, Tracy.
Hello, I'm Tracy Chisholm from the new Rannoch Centre. I'm a Deputy Manager. Just to give a bit of background, COVID forced us to look at the way we could support our clients who were most vulnerable in a different and safe way. When the first lockdown started, many of our staff were actually retasked to other essential services, so we were left with a small core team of staff. So at that point, we actually had to look and see who we could offer outreach to. So obviously we had to prioritise which clients needed support from staff. So we had a small core team who were going out and doing outreach and providing personal care, lunches, some emotional support to clients and carers, particularly clients who were living with dementia. On top of that, we ensured that every other client and carer who weren't able to have a face-to-face visit were phoned every week so that we could check on their well-being and obviously put in support if we needed to. Initially, we found that carers and clients appeared to be coping pretty well. I think they were resigned to the fact there was this lockdown. At that point, we thought it was going to be quite a short-term thing. However, as the time went on, the pressures really did start to show, and we were able to respond quickly to offer additional support. Some of the positive things that have come out of the situation, as our staff team have gradually returned to her service, we've actually able to develop our outreach service, and it's developed quite organically. So we've been taking new referrals, we've been able to offer additional support to all our clients now. When I talk about support, clients are working towards outcomes with staff support. So they're looking at things that they're maybe interested in. Sometimes it's a bit of reminiscence. Sometimes it's a bit of history research, baking, walking, supporting clients to attend appointments. The outreach model, which we had never actually done before, has actually become very person-centred for some individual clients, particularly clients living with dementia. One gentleman in particular actually found the building quite overstimulating, and sometimes he could become very distressed, and we did have to give him a lot of reassurance for him to feel comfortable here. He in particular has actually flourished in the outreach model, and his wife is actually finding that he's a lot more content, and the relationship between them has actually improved. So, you know, in circumstances like that, the outreach has provided the carer with support and respite, but it's actually reduced the stress and distress for the client living with dementia. Another good thing, staff relationship with carers has become much closer, and there's a renewed sense that we're actually a partnership and we're sharing the care of their loved one living with dementia. The staff team have also been able to see people living in their own home and how a person living with dementia copes in their own environment, and we've been able to work with the individual to build on these strengths through agreeing outcomes that the client would like to achieve. Also, in providing the outreach, the staff team have been able to monitor individual home situations and daily living skills. And because they're in someone's environment for a good 3 hours, they're actually picking up on things that maybe other care supporters might not pick up because their time's very limited. Also during COVID, we found that the usual protocol and barriers to access support have been a lot more relaxed, and this has actually led to a much more efficient referral process for many of the services. Another positive thing that has come out of our change in service is that we've developed a programme of virtual day opportunities. So a lot of our clients are actually able to access some activities online and on Zoom, as well as having the outreach visits. Some of the things that we have sort of learned for the future, because our staff team were depleted quite a bit to begin with to support essential services, staff have actually had to re-establish some relationship with clients, and this has been more difficult for clients living with dementia, as in some cases the staff member hadn't seen the client for maybe 6 months. We have also noticed there's been quite a marked cognitive decline in many clients living with dementia due to the lack of structure and also the stimulation, not coming to the centre, but also not seeing family and friends and keeping up with their usual activities. We're finding now that clients are starting to really miss each other, and now that there's the more confidence in the vaccine, are really keen to come back to the building. Another challenge we found is that because of the change in restrictions, we've constantly had to adapt our service. So when the stay-at-home message came in and the essential travel after Christmas, this curbed the type of outreach we could provide, and it did lead to a bit of confusion and disruption for clients. Looking to the future, I feel that social care has done a really amazing job of underpinning the NHS during this time, and I think now's the time to look at making best use of the service going forward. And I think we're going to have to be creative and be innovative, and hopefully the barriers which were in place before COVID, which have since been much less, and hopefully going forward that will stay the same. With regards to our own service, because the outreach has been such a positive model, we are now going to go forward or offering a building-based service as well as an outreach service, and including the virtual day opportunities, so that each client does have a day opportunity service that's individual and unique to them. In doing so, we're going to build on the strengths the staff team have demonstrated during the pandemic. A lot of our staff have been lone working during the pandemic, and they have become more confident. They're much more autonomous in their decision making, and it has been lovely to see them develop and grow. And that can only benefit the clients and the service as a whole. I feel as well that we're also in a strong position to build on the partnership working, which has developed over the last year. We have worked closely with the NHS and voluntary sections, and I think that is something that we will definitely continue to work on.
Hello, my name's Sheila. I work for PCAVS in Perth. I joined them as their support worker for carers of people living with a diagnosis of dementia. So just to say a little bit about the effect of COVID-19 and the lockdown on the carers that we found. Straight away, PCAVS put all staff onto doing support and wellbeing calls, and that was for over 1,000 carers, not all with a diagnosis of dementia further cared for, but obviously there's quite a few within that number. The difficulties that they found most, carers found most, was the lack of all services, and services having been stopped at very short notice, with no word of what was happening, where else to go, and they very quickly found themselves moving from a family member or relative, husband, wife, son, daughter, to being then a full-time carer, 24/7. Respite time, there was absolutely none of this, not even for 2 hours a day for anybody. So we found a lot of families were going into crisis a lot quicker, or that's before any intervention could happen. So we did a lot more referrals to our colleagues within the access team. And that was really about respite for the carer more than anything else. There was very little intervention that could be done before that point of crisis. We also found that for carers, a lot of the decisions had to be made about their cared for going into a care home, because sadly either the dementia journey had been a bit quicker or they just weren't coping. So through carer stress, there was people accessing care homes. And that led to a lot of guilt from the carer's point of view. The unknown, they weren't allowed to go in and visit their cared for. They couldn't even picture where their cared for were within that place. Visiting, as we all know, was very restricted, and a lot of the time nothing. So carer stress, again, was stress and guilt. There was a lot of that around those situations. That also then sort of fed into carer isolation. They then had absolutely nobody at home. They'd gone from full-time caring to, well, what will I do now? What can I do now? And again, there's very little for them. Accessing appointments with, whether it be hospital or GPs, again, people were only allowed to go in themselves. So the cared for would be asked to go in for the appointment, and the carer being asked to stay out in the car, and the doctor or whoever would give them a telephone call because their cared for was unable to relay things that had happened within the appointment, or even unable to understand and answer the questions that had been asked. So there was a lot of carer stress around, where doctors, etc., being told everything that they had to be told, and they very much felt that they were being kept apart from their cared for person. They weren't allowed almost to be their voice. So yeah, carer stress has been very difficult throughout lockdown and COVID. Having said that, within the telephone service that PCAVS put in place, regular phone calls to people. We got a lot of positive feedback. I'd just like to say some of the quotes, which were, PCAV staff are our lifeline. There's nobody else that we speak to. We always have a very enjoyable chat. And sometimes that's all that was needed, was just somebody different to talk to and have a normal, everyday conversation with them. It was nice to be kept in touch. Had it not been for PCAVs, I would never have coped. Staff were always very helpful and they listened to what I had to say. When we did then manage to do some home visits with some of our staff, the visits gave me a bit of me time. So me time for the carer, that valuable hour, couple of hours, you know, to yourself. And as we know, that me time is extremely important to carers and carers of people living with dementia. So the initial response, our day service had to close. All our staff were making calls to our carers. Staff had to work from home. We had to get equipment for everybody, laptops, phones, internet lines in some cases. Daycare staff were making phone calls as well. We had to access grants for buying equipment, whether that be for staff or for carers, to allow them to join online. But we also, one of our staff members runs online groups for carers, and these have been extremely popular, extremely well attended, and extremely well organised. So that's been a real positive for carers of what has been put in place for us, and we would hope to keep that moving on. So moving forward, we're really looking at peer support groups for specifically carers looking after a person living with dementia. Myself as a dedicated dementia worker, and making strong working bonds with others within the area, whereby we can all work together to support our carers and they're cared for. Thank you.
Thanks to both Sheila and Tracy. Despite the many challenges COVID has brought, they are still doing everything they can to support people living with dementia and unpaid carers. Okay, so it's time for a short break, which you'll see from the programme is for 10 minutes. When we come back, we are handing our chairing duties over to Heather Edwards from the Care Inspectorate, who will take us through the Q&A session. Remember to put any comments in the chat section and any questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Enjoy your break and see you in 10 minutes.
Hello everybody and welcome back. I hope you managed to get a good break, and I hope you managed to get a stretch as well. Sometimes sitting looking at the screen for a long time can be a bit tricky, so a good stretch and a good move around. I'm Heather Edwards and I'm going to be your chair through this next session for question and answers. I'm currently the Allied Health Professionals Consultant at the Care Inspectorate, and I'm joining you from a bit of a sunny Brechin here. I joined the Care Inspectorate in 2013 as their dementia consultant, so this agenda and this topic is something that is really very important to me. Before we begin, I just want to remind everybody, and I think Shona picked this up earlier, that the Tayside storytelling sessions, they involved people, unpaid carers and people supporting people living with dementia and unpaid carers. So they didn't include people living with dementia at this time, but there is going to be that opportunity for these sessions to be held again. So there will be that opportunity for everybody to have their voices heard and for people's priorities to come through and to be added to those priorities that have already been gathered. So I think Arlene has popped into the chat to get those sessions set up. So that will happen, and everybody will get the chance to have their voices heard and reflected back in there. So let's get started. I'm going to ask our panel if they could join us on screen. So if you could pop your cameras on. And as if by magic, here they all come. Lovely. I think we're maybe missing. Perfect. Great. Thank you very much. So I'm going to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to ask you just to introduce yourself. If you could just say who you are and your title, please. So if we can start with Kieran.
A warm welcome, everyone. Good morning. My name is Kieran, and I'm from Dundee Care Centre, and I'm one of the team leaders in the care support team.
Thank you, Kieran. Alison, over to you.
Morning, everybody. My name is Alison Lee. I'm the Community Services Manager for the Dundee Mental Health for Older People Services in Dundee.
Thank you. Emma Jane.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Emma Jane Wells, and I'm the chair of the Angus Integrated Joint Board.
Thank you. And finally, George, we've heard from you already, but I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Heather. My name's George Grindlay, and I'm an unpaid carer living in Angus.
Thank you very much. And in addition, off camera and ready to jump in if needed, we've got Graham and Shirley and Sheila who are there. And if there's any questions about Tracy Chisholm's presentation, apparently she can't join us, but we have her colleague Shona Thompson in the background if there's any questions there. And I do know we do have a question for George around the meeting centres, so I will make sure that I get to you, George, there. Off screen, we also have Arlene. So if there's anything around the storytelling or Life Changes Trust in general, we've got Arlene there as well. And I'll keep an eye on my chat with the questions coming in. So just to get us started, and this is a question that I'll put for all of the panel, and we'll go around for you all, is, you know, you've had a look at those priorities that came out from the sessions. What do you think is needed to realise these priorities and the needs that's been expressed within them? And I'm thinking in particular, are there examples that you can share from your own experience that really shows, you know, the kinds of approaches that are needed to make sure these priorities become a reality? I'll let you have a quick think about that one, but I'm going to head over to Alison first.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. It's really quite powerful listening to the voices of people through the storytelling. And I think these events are so welcome in terms of just making sure we stay focused in that way. I think we can all be guilty of working in our own bits and thinking that we're doing things right. We take into account policies and procedures. And I just love the idea of the storytelling. I think that feedback for us is always a very difficult thing to get right, and I think we've tried lots of different models to do that over the years. And I think just looking at the storytelling, just going back to the basics of just having those conversations with people. We do look at feedback sessions with carers and forums and one-to-one interviews, and I certainly will be looking at implementing this within our teams as well. So I'm hoping that if we build on that with all of our teams within my services, that we can know exactly where we are and what we can look at moving forward for people.
Lovely, thank you, Alison. Emma Jane.
Hi, thanks. Well, yeah, I suppose just to echo what Alison's saying in terms of how much use this kind of event is, especially for myself as a non-executive chair of the Angus Integrated Joint Board, and of course for the HSCP staff who are tasked with you know, delivering care and support to dementia sufferers and unpaid carers. To hear directly from those with lived experience and their carers, and in particular what the pandemic has meant for them, has been very useful, and really to hear about some of those examples of very good practice that's happening. I suppose I would start by saying that in Angus, we're very fortunate that we have very much an integrated partnership, and that's not just health and social care, but with our third sector partners and our independent sector partners as well. And I think that puts us in a very positive position to be able to address some of these priorities going forward. And I think it's also important to say we're all very much on the same page in terms of the importance of person-centred care and individual care. But it's clear that if multiple services are involved across the sector, it can make it a bit disjointed and a bit complicated. And Angus, we do try and get around that by having integrated teams, but if there are improvements to be made, then the HSCP will be tasked with coming up with ways, innovative ways to address that, and we will certainly be looking at that as we go into the next phase of planning for the next strategic commissioning plan.
Thank you. George, anything you'd like to pick up, and anything that you've heard from Alison and Emma Jane so far?
Yeah, we've seen that a lot of people don't get care until they're in crisis. That's a very difficult point, especially during the pandemic. Trying to get care or assistance or support can be very difficult for both the carer and for the person that they care for. Because of the closure of daycare centres and places like Care in Your Hub and things like that, I'm seeing my wife 24/7, which is unusual, and that can create a lot of problems. I'm glad to hear Emma Jane saying that they're listening to the priorities by people, and so far as we know, there's nobody with dementia being able to give anything to the priorities, but that's hopefully coming. And take on board what Alison was saying about the storytelling. It's very powerful. People's voices are listened to better than the written word, and experiences can be brought out during the storytelling sessions that may never, ever come out over a one-to-one. And if those are listened to and actioned and part of a plan, that's going to make a better service, hopefully, in the future. And the pandemic, to be honest, has brought on its own challenges, but there's been changes brought in by different locations, by the health services. Everybody has had to make changes so that a service, no matter what it is, can be provided. And that's really helpful for the carer, as well as the person they care for.
Thank you, George. Thank you. And finally, down to Kieran. Going to have to pop your mic on, Kieran.
Sorry, I must have not clicked it properly. Hello again. So thank you, George. I think some of what you said there kind of rings through to kind of what we're trying to achieve at the Care Centre, and having a look at the priorities. Some of those priorities kind of fit into what we're looking at in terms of how we deliver our services and support people. The first thing we would always say is that unpaid carers are the experts in this. So that's who we go to, that's who we speak to, and that's who we ask for what we need to be doing and how we need to do it. And that's what we always strive to do. And yes, the pandemic did throw up a lot of curveballs and a lot of restrictions. But again, we reached out to carers and asked them what do they want us to do. And we kind of adapted online provision. We provided more telephone support, and we looked at providing technology and stuff that's been mentioned in the various presentations this morning to help support people access online. And going forward, that's what we will continue to do, put the unpaid carers at the forefront of what we do and how we do it, and making sure that particularly around sort of dementia that we are looking at different ways that we can provide, as George said, respite opportunities, because that is the feedback we've got from carers across the board during the pandemic, that when services stopped, their caring roles didn't stop, and in a lot of cases, those caring roles increased. So we looked at ways we could try and introduce our short breaks program to help carers think differently about what a short break might look like during the pandemic. And once, when it was safe to do so, we prioritised people who couldn't access telephone or even online support, because it's not always possible, because sometimes you actually want to speak about the person you're caring for and not being able to do that if you're in the house with that person. So we were able to start doing some face-to-face work, be it out in the garden or maybe a walk in the park. And again, that was coming from the feedback we got from carers. So in terms of priorities, that's how we would address those priorities, by speaking to the carers first.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to pick up on part of George's point and looking at a question that's come in just recently here, and it's an idea of the consequences of failure of demand, you know, that waiting for the crisis to hit before the right services have come in. And I'm going to sort of put this back thinking primarily for Emma Jane at the moment, but if anybody else wants to come in on this one, you know, thinking about the potential quality of life impact that has on people, but also the economic benefits and impacts for the health and social care partnerships. How does that get factored in to when you look at your priorities, Emma Jane?
Well, it absolutely does get factored in. You know, we've got all of these considerations to take on board, and I think making sure that things are in place before crisis hits is beneficial to absolutely everybody in these kinds of circumstances. And I think I would just, on that point, just bring in, I think there was another question in terms of working across the 3 partnership areas in Tayside. You know, I think there's something that can be done in that space as well. We were already doing this in terms of the development of the mental health strategy, which is a Tayside-wide mental health strategy, and we're going to start to see some of the outcomes from that. And it's very much how I can see us going forward, is working across the 3 areas to make sure, you know, we're pooling resources, we're making sure the right people are available as well at the right time, and at all times considering that, you know, this is all about considering the people who are experiencing dementia and their unpaid carers. It doesn't matter where they live in Tayside, we need to be able to offer that support at the right time in the right place, and to make sure that it's person-centred as well.
Thank you. I'm just going to, this is really nice being able to look at the questions and be able to follow on, but I'm just thinking, taking that point then of a joined up strategy and joining things up, which I think Tayside has done, you know, how do we share the learning? Alison, you know, you're based through Dundee. How do you share the learning that you get from Dundee with colleagues in Angus or Perth and Kinross, and vice versa, so that what we get in Tayside is the very best and we build on that learning?
I think, as Emma Jane has already said, the mental health strategy and wellbeing strategy is a Tayside-wide one, so lots of links are there. So Perth, Angus and Dundee, various people are all involved looking at what that strategy will look like. So it will be Tayside-wide. So that's brought a lot of us closer together. We also have adapted some more links, I would say. And as George said, the pandemic has brought lots of challenges, but lots of opportunities as well. So I think in terms of the 3 areas, we are talking a lot more in terms of our mental health services, our approaches, our post-diagnostic services, which have always been quite linked. We've always worked together across Tayside in terms of our post-diagnostic work. We have slightly different teams within the areas, but we all feed into a Scottish-wide programme around post-diagnostic support. And I think, you know, going back to, again, George's really well made point about people working with people before crisis, to me, the post-diagnostic work is absolutely key. And if we can get that right as we move forward and make that as personalised as we can be for the individual and their carers, that can only give us benefits further down the line when there are changes in that person or the carer's needs, that we have a foundation there that we can all work together on. And I would say our links in terms of the post-diagnostic service is quite strong across Tayside.
Lovely, thank you. I'm going to ask Graham Galloway if you could just pop your camera on just quickly here, because we've got a question around, are there any plans to have an online UK directory of meeting centres, or maybe this is already in place?
I think this might be a better question for Shirley, Heather.
Okie dokies, over to you, Shirley.
Oh, hello. Thanks very much, Graham, for passing that over. Yes, as the UK Meeting Centre Support Programme, there is definitely a plan, and I obviously do have a list. We have 16 meeting centres across the UK at the moment, and by the end of the year we'll have 25. So that list is absolutely vital, and we're working now at the Association for Dementia Studies on thinking about how the network evolves and what people want from that. So if anybody wants a list, I have one, but I can't point you to one on the internet at the moment. Thank you for the question.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you. This is a question sort of looking around unpaid carers, and I'm wondering if Kieran and George would want to come in, and potentially Graham as well on this one. So coming out of COVID, recovery is going to be really important for people living with dementia and their unpaid carers. What are going to be the key factors in making this happen quickly and effectively? Kieran.
Hello again. So what we done during the lockdown, again, from speaking to partner agencies and carers, was to look at how we could get information out there. So we did a lot of Facebook Live sessions, and we started them within the first sort of month. And that was giving everybody the current information on what we were doing. And then other services came along, and we done sort of Q&A sessions to keep people informed. That kind of tied in with the locality approach that we've been doing over the past couple of years here in Dundee Care Centre. We kind of recognised that the way we were working was maybe not meeting the needs of all unpaid carers. We wanted to look at a more community approach on how we do things. And we've now got workers based in all of the localities in Dundee. So that will be our kind of starting point coming out of the pandemic. Those workers will start re-engaging with the services in people's communities and understanding what's best for their needs. And then we can make those links and redevelop those partnerships. And that's kind of would be our starting point on coming out of the lockdown. And again, obviously speaking to the carers to find out what it is they need.
Thank you. How about Graham Galloway? Do you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, in many ways we've already started. We have recently been accredited by Paths for All to set up a health walk, and we had our very first health walk yesterday in an absolutely miserable, dreary, cold, rainy day, and we still had 13 people turn out for that. And I think things like that are going to be really essential. A lot of people have had very little social contact over the past year, and if we can ease people in gently by doing things like health walks and doing things outside in safe environments, it's going to help ease some of the anxiety that I think a lot of people are feeling. Also, hopefully address some of the issues that we're definitely seeing around people's physical health and mobility issues. Again, a lot of people really have not been getting huge amounts of exercise. So by doing things like health walks and some of the exercise sessions that we're doing virtually, hopefully we can start to build up a bit of strength in people again, both physical strength and that kind of social strength and getting back out, so that when we are able to open in person again, it's not quite as jarring as it might be for people.
Thank you. And George?
Coming out of the pandemic as a carer, it's going to be looking for support for Chris and myself, because I suffer quite dramatically some conditions. I was on the walk that Graham was on about yesterday, and it was amazing. It was freezing cold, it was raining, but everybody had a good laugh. We all wanted to be out there. It's been over a year that we've not been able to make physical contact with others. And I think that's an important part. Chris was really anxious about going out. It's the first time she's been out for ages. Mm-hmm. Meeting people again, really anxious. But when she was there, it was like, wow. She was talking to everybody was talking to her. We all did the walk, and it was really enjoyable. And I think getting back to as normal a life as possible, where Chris used to go to the hub 4 days a week, which gave me, as a carer, time out to do what I needed to do, whether that was go shopping, get my hair cut, or just go a run in the car to chill. That's where I find it difficult, because I'm not getting a break as I used to do. Mm-hmm. And for a carer, it's difficult if you're getting 10 times a day. How do you do this? Or where is that? That becomes very repetitive, and it does help hit your mental health as well. You've got to remember that the person who's saying it may not remember saying it. And that's something it's part of life. But it's during this, it becomes really frustrating, and you lose your temper, you flare out, and that's where a carer does need a little bit of respite, does need a little bit of support, whereas a person that has a condition needs the support of others to understand how their condition's going, how it's working, how it's affecting them. And I think that's what's missed. It's the sort of day-to-day things that's missed. So yeah, what I'm looking for is Chris going back to the hub, hopefully, going on health walks, going out the house, me going out the house with her, supporting her, and being able to work. I do a lot of voluntary work, so going back to that, hopefully, and just getting out of the house, to be honest. That's the biggest part of it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting because things aren't just going to automatically go back to how they were. I don't think there is any probably going back to how things were pre-COVID. Things are going to have changed. There is going to be a time of adjustment and a time of healing and recovery. I'm going to ask Shona Thompson if she wouldn't mind joining us right now, because we've got a question that's come in for her, and it's around thinking about what adjustments had to be made for support during COVID. And actually, are some of these going to continue as we come out of lockdown?
Hi everyone, thank you for a very interesting day so far. In relation to support that had to be changed, our building basis just stopped from the 23rd of March last year, and we haven't returned to building as yet. We are hoping to return to building services on the 19th of April. However, it's going to be a phased return, so even that isn't going to be the same as what it was last year. We went to the outreach model, as Tracy explained, and we have supported virtual day opportunities. We're having to explain to everybody that the return to building isn't going to be the same as it was before. There's going to be less people because of physical distancing. There's going to be less people in the transport, less people in activities. The types of activities that we're going to be offering have also changed. We are looking at more outdoor activities. So the support is changed, where we have sent out easy read documentation to advise people of PPE, what to expect when they're coming into the building, the signage. So it is a lot more health and safety orientated in relation to infection prevention and control, but it's making sure that our clients are aware of the changes. In relation to carers, we've always provided carer support worker within our service. We've been quite fortunate, and we've had that for a number of years, but the need has increased so much that we're actually being invested in, and we're able to employ another member of staff to support in this area, because we realise that it is needed, especially coming out of the pandemic. Our support for the individual, we've tried to maintain some sense of normality with the activities, with our development folders. We're trying to ensure that it's very individualised, that an individual can achieve their outcomes, that we're not setting anybody up to fail. But we've also incorporated the carer more, because we're doing outreach in an individual's home, and that was maybe a link that was missing before. Yes, we included the care in what was happening in the centre, but now we're more person-centred in including what's happening within their own home, and the grateful that we've been invited to be able to support within that environment. So I don't know if I've gone off tangent, but
that's fine. Thank you.
Pass that back to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to take a chair's liberty here, and I'm going to ask a question that I've got here. One of the ideas that I've always had around person-centered care is that you can't deliver that unless, as a staff member or anybody working with people living with dementia, that you feel valued yourself. And COVID has been a real challenge for staff, both paid and unpaid. So how have you looked after your staff team? You know, thinking about this recovery period now, the staff are just having to keep going. What have you been doing to support your own staff's well-being? I wonder if I could come to Alison.
we've gone through different stages of this over the year, Heather, as I'm sure you can imagine. At the beginning of it, you know, staff are also carers at home and have their own health concerns and their own worries, and but ultimately they're there to do a job. So it was trying to look at our staff, not just as staff, but what were they worried about? How could we reassure them to make sure we're still delivering the services we need to deliver? So at the beginning, it was just about trying to make everything safe in our workplace, or how we adapted to working in workplaces or home working. Lots of support around our wellbeing centres for staff. Making sure we were picking up cues how different staff are feeling. You know, as I say, people have their own family lives and their own concerns. So lots of, I think, looking at people as individuals and trying to think what would help them to help other people. So I think we've managed to do that. I think I've been really proud of the staff, I have to say, in the teams over the past year, who have kept going, who have adapted, who have learned all sorts of new things. Technology being one of them, which most people were terrified about, and everyone's adapted to. Our teams came up with lots of innovative ways to support people in terms of packs for carers and packs for people with dementia that couldn't perhaps go out and do their usual things, to give them a focus. And that was a really good piece of work. So I would like to think that we knew that if we didn't look after staff, we couldn't look after anyone else.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm just keeping an eye on time, and it looks like we've got a couple of minutes just before we wrap things up here. We'd mentioned about the mental health strategy for Tayside, and I'm going to show my own ignorance here. Is there a specific dementia strategy for Tayside? And if there isn't, is this something that you would consider to be a priority area? And I'll pop into Emma Jane first.
So in the fairly recently developed Tayside mental health strategy, there is a specific work stream that is about developing dementia diagnosis and mild cognitive impairment pathways. And I think one of the aims of that is to be able to provide more local diagnosis, which is, you know, potentially more timely diagnosis, and hopefully cutting across some of that sort of disjointed working that may take up more time. So there is a specific work stream within the mental health, the new mental health strategy.
Lovely, thank you. Kieran, would you like to see a specific dementia strategy for Tayside as a standalone?
I think partly yes, because then I was obviously put a very specific focus on the kind of dementia side of things, but the other side as well is we want to be as inclusive as well. So although we support unpaid carers for all the different conditions, we want them to feel included in the wider part of what we do. So having that kind of focus, so we would know when we're supporting an unpaid carer, a lot of times that initial contact we have is they've been given, that they're cared for, has been given that diagnosis. They're not kind of sure what's next, what's going to happen further down the line. So if there was a more specific information around that, and that's something we as staff members would be more knowledgeable about, we can have those kind of early conversations with carers to kind of keep them sort of reassured that there is their needs are being thought of, the person with the dementia diagnosis needs to be thought of, and there is a specific strategy around that.
Thank you. I'm going to pass over to George for the last word in this Q&A.
Totally agree with Kieran that it will focus a need for carers of people with dementia or mental health illnesses. It's really important to make sure that not only is the person who's diagnosed with a condition supported, but the carer is supported too. And that doesn't always happen. Luckily enough, I feel that I personally have been supported well, because I've gone to all the appointments with Chris, with the consultant, being able to see different things, be able to ask questions, because there's not a lot of information given. Once a diagnosis is given to the person, I had to go and find it. That's a big issue for me as a carer. And I think that having a focused strategy for people with dementia would be really good for both the person that's cared for and the person giving the care. It'll also direct the person giving the care to signpost to other organisations that they may not be aware of, that they can make contact with, and support groups and things like that. These are all important things that help the well-being of the cared for, as well as the person caring. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Thank you. So we're at the end of our Q&A session. So thank you all so much for joining us. I know you've all got busy things going on in your day, no doubt, but thank you. I think this has been a really important session, and I think it's something that lays a foundation for going forward. And I think particularly around the dementia strategy, there's certainly a further conversation to be had, and it's a strategy that then has to come to life, because it has to be more power than just a nice glossy document. So it actually has to make a difference. So thank you so very much. You can turn your cameras off and you can have a bit of a relax now. So thank you. I'd also like to really thank everybody that gave questions and comments throughout this, and I was trying to keep an eye on different bits there, so thank you very much. I think it's so important to have this kind of dialogue and these kind of discussions, but more importantly is the action that comes out of these discussions following on from this. So thank you. I'm now going to welcome Arlene Crockett from the Life Changes Trust, who is going to talk about the Trust's small grant programme and also a little bit about the next steps following today's events. She's also going to be talking to Kate Robertson from the Outside the Box, who were recipients of the Life Changes Trust small grant in Tayside. So Arlene, I'm going to take my leave. I'm going to thank you all for having me today and hand you over. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Heather, and a warm welcome to you, Kate, from Outside the Box, for joining us today. So, Kate, before we have a wee bit of a chat, I'd like to bring people up to speed about our Creating Better Lives regional grants programme, and more specifically about what we've been doing in Tayside. So prior to the pandemic and after each of our learning events, which we held face-to-face pre-COVID-19, we opened a small grants programme for the relevant NHS region. Local organisations were then asked to apply to deliver work which would support people living with dementia and unpaid carers in their own community, so very much a focus on local. We offered grants of between £2,000 and £15,000, which could last for up to 18 months for the given project. Once applications are submitted, and to ensure that a local approach is maintained throughout the whole process, including the decision-making element, we established a panel of local people for each round of the regional grants to decide which applications would then be funded. The panels are typically made up of people who live and work in the area, including people with experience and expertise in dementia, and more importantly, where possible, we also included people living with dementia and also unpaid carers. The Life Changes Trust funding staff are always on offer for the panels for advice and guidance, but panel members themselves have the final decision to which applications are successful or otherwise. A local organisation or individual is then commissioned to support collaborative working and encourage shared learning between projects that have been awarded. So we appoint a learning network coordinator, big long title, but that's what we do. By providing those small grants directly to local groups, we want to strengthen the relationships between people and their own community. It's very important for people to access to the knowledge, support and expertise, advice of larger organisations, but sometimes local community groups can make the biggest difference in people's lives. So, in the summer of 2020, we accelerated our small grants programme in light of COVID-19 and opened it to 4 of the 9 health board areas that we were left to launch: Edinburgh Lothians, Borders, Fife and Tayside. We now have Lanarkshire and Forth Valley now open, with the remaining 3 opening in the next 3 months, and that will bring us up to speed of 14 health board areas. So I'm delighted to say that Tayside, the panel there, approved 5 grants with a total of just under £58,000 awarded, so 57,824 to be exact, all awarded locally. And we've also recently appointed Graham Galloway, who you've seen earlier on the webinar, from Kirrie Connections as the Learning Network Coordinator for Tayside. Details of the awardees are on our website, and I am delighted to have Kate Robertson here now. So enough from me, Kate. Kate's going to talk about the project that benefited from the Small Grants Programme, and she represents one of those awardees. So Kate, firstly, can you tell us a wee bit about Outside the Box and what it offers to people in the community?
Absolutely. Firstly, I'd just like to say hello to everyone and thank you for everyone's contribution so far. It's been incredibly thought-provoking and very enjoyable. So I'm part of Outside the Box, and we started in 2004. We're a small independent charity and we aim to work as a social enterprise. We develop and provide support to people and communities across Scotland who want to make a difference in their own community. We can offer practical support and enable people to learn the type of skills that are important for establishing new ventures and for sustaining them and keeping them going for the long term. We assist people to contribute to issues that are about how their own communities work or how wider society works. A couple of examples is that we can support people to share skills and experiences. We work alongside people to develop community-based solutions to the issues and challenges that they are experiencing, and also have their voices heard within a kind of policy area as well. Over the years, we have learned so much about the issues that affect hundreds of people and hundreds of groups that we have worked alongside. And we combine this learning with our knowledge about how different types of community development support works for different communities and in completely different contexts. As a team and as an organisation, we really value the contributions and the knowledge and the experiences of the people we work alongside. And personally, we're really committed to continue our learning from them. This learning we share in a wider field. We develop project resources that then we can share through other projects across Scotland and beyond. So the work that we do with local groups supports the local community and wider society. For many years now, we have been working alongside people who are living with dementia and unpaid carers. And some of our work with Agnes Houston on sensory challenges with dementia, our Food Buddies project, and more recently our Digital Buddies project, which really came to life in the past year with COVID.
I never hit my unmute, I'm unmuted now. So thanks, Kate. A wealth of stuff going on there outside the box, and we know at the Trust how much that has had an impact on the lives of people with dementia and unpaid carers. So good to see you benefiting from one of our regional grants programme awards. So moving on to that, can you tell us a bit about the new project developed as a result of the funding called Linking Local Dementia-Friendly Connections and how this is going?
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to hear the priorities that were outlined today, and a lot of what we've been hearing today I will take back to the project and reflect on, and we're constantly adapting and learning. But the overall aim of the project is to strengthen community-based social connections, and we'll work alongside people who are affected dementia in Highlands and North East Perthshire. So that'll be in and around communities like Aberfeldy, Dunkeld, over towards Blairgowrie area. The project was developed in response to what we were hearing from individuals and community groups about social connections and really important human rights-based themes like choice, availability, accessibility, respect and independence. Of course, the past year, COVID has had a huge impact on everyone's social connections, but even more so for people who are living with dementia and unpaid carers. And since we developed the project last year, it feels like everything has changed and nothing has changed all at the same time. The project just started last month, and we're already adapting our approach and our plans to take account of the impact of the last lockdown. And going forward, we know that we will need to remain flexible and adapt the project as we all collectively move out of lockdown and work our way through different tiers. So going forward, we imagine in the short term, at the very least, we'll be taking a blended approach and striking a safe balance between meaningful connections digitally and hopefully at some point in person. And that'll be to deliver 4 strands of our Lincoln Local project. So collectively, we'll work together to strengthen social connections through events and gatherings that bring more people together. Again, that'll be a sort of blended approach, hopefully. We'll be developing project resources and publicity to raise awareness and encourage people to think about different types of social connections, how to make these accessible, and how to reach people in and around their communities. It's really important for us that we do this collaboratively and in partnership with people who are living with dementia and unpaid carers, and work alongside local venues and activity providers to support them to become more confident in what they're delivering in a dementia-friendly way. Lastly, throughout all of that activity, we're really going to want to work to connect individuals and groups and communities. So as the project develops, people have different types of relationships, more friendships, and stronger connections with their communities, because we have become a wee bit more disconnected over the past year. Our hope is that people will have time and opportunities to try out some new things, as well as doing the things that they absolutely love and that keeps them well and healthy. You know, having a buddy to attend a local theatre show, going for a walk in the park, meeting somebody for a cuppa and a bit of cake in a local cafe, and short-term anyways, whatever that blended or digital approach might be. To get the project started, we've been able to secure a small number of iPads and MiFi devices through Connecting Scotland. So we'll be supporting people to connect digitally in the first instance, and we've actually built up quite a lot of easy accessible resources through our Digital Buddies project that we can draw on and use. So really, I'm kind of asking anyone here today, if you're interested or you think you might know a friend, neighbour or relative that might be interested in the Lincoln Local project or the digital packs, please get in touch with us. We would love to have a conversation with you and love to learn from you. And thank you for everyone's contributions today.
Thanks, Kate, and great to have a call to action at the end of our presentation. It's always really important because you've got a captive audience. And I think you're right. I think it's been really important for communities and projects within them to really be able to adapt and flex to that change, because there's been many highs and lows through this pandemic, as we know, and the real impact on beneficiaries as a result. And I think probably, you know, the uniqueness or the beauty of what you've got is that you're a new project, so you can respond to what that looks like, and you can take into account what worked before, but also what has worked during the pandemic and then the response thereafter, because as some of the commentary through the webinar this morning has said, you know, the digital stuff is really good and it works really well, but there are still people that are not able to or don't want to access it, support in that way. So the blended approach and being responsive to that is really helpful. So yeah, and really, as you say, just with that really strong human rights value base at the heart around, you know, that independence, choice, respect, and I think that flows through everything that we see at the Trust, and very much has flowed through a lot of what we've heard about this morning from our contributors. So thank you so much, Kate. Just a quick addition around the small grants programme to say that the Trust has also commissioned an independent evaluation of the small grants programme that's been undertaken at the moment by Blake Stevenson. And the report for that is due out towards the end of this year, in and around November 2021. So many thanks to Kate for joining us and sharing some of that work. So before I introduce the final part of the programme and hand over to our wonderful co-chairs, I'd like to just say a few words about the importance of this event and the learning going forward. There's been a lot shared today about what's going on locally in terms of project learning, and more critically, what people say are their priorities for dementia now and also for the future. As I've mentioned a few times today, or not me, but my colleagues, we still have a bit more to do with local partners to try and engage people with dementia in some of those storytelling sessions that Shona has mentioned earlier today. And we will update the priorities to reflect this. A call to action has been made by Shona and several of my colleagues, and also in the chat. So if you're interested in passing on the information about the sessions when we get them organised, then leave your contact details in the chat and we will contact you directly when they've been confirmed. These sessions are for people with dementia, but as I've also said in the chat, if people need a supporter or a friend, whatever, to be with them, that's absolutely fine too, but it's critical that we try and get sessions taken forward both online and by telephone. A more detailed report will then come afterwards. So what we ask the centre to do at Village Stories is produce a more detailed and robust report that reflects all of the sessions. We'll include those priorities that you've heard earlier today. We'll include a whole plethora of quotes and stories from people that took part, and that will be a good way to start those influence and conversations as well. Because what we need to do is we need to plan together. This needs to be a collective approach going forward. So we will make sure that everybody on the call today receives that, as well as sharing it publicly on our website. I know, having heard from many people on our panel today, that health and social care partnerships and IJBs are working on their own plans, but it's really good to hear that there's an appetite for some kind of collective action in relation to dementia strategy work across Tayside, and good to hear that some of those building blocks are already in place in relation to the mental health strategy that both Alison and Emma Jane mentioned earlier. And this is critical because this is not the end of the conversation, this is the start of new conversations. And just to say that at the Trust, we are more than happy to support and facilitate further discussion in that regard, because we've already done some of that work in other regional areas that we've had events, including Orkney, Aberdeenshire, and more recently, there's now work underway in Fife as a result of their regional events. So please, talk to us at the Trust, make contact, and we'll definitely be able to speak a bit more about that and the impact that that has had in other areas. But I encourage you all today, a call to action from me, if I may, to take the learning that's relevant to you from today's webinar and really make that change happen, whether it's individually in your community, as part of a group, or as part of a bigger organisation. Today isn't the end of the conversation, but the beginning of new ones, with collaboration of focus. And I'm going to end just with something that George said. You know, we need to listen to what people have said through the storytelling and through the webinar today, and then we need to take some action. So before I hand over to our co-chairs, Robert and George, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to them both for agreeing to take on this role today. They have done an amazing job, I'm sure you all agree. And I know, and I'm sure many on this webinar know, that sharing is not easy at the best of times, but online really brings its own challenges. So real kudos to them for taking that on. The delivery has been seamless of the programme, and being part of the planning event as well has been a real inspiration to us at the Trust, and has been really helpful and informative for us in terms of our own learning. And what it really does is reinforces the importance of having people with dementia and unpaid carers front and centre in all that we do. So a big thanks to everyone here from the Trust for joining us, and I'm now going to hand back over to those fantastic co-chairs, Robert and George, for some closing remarks. So over to you, chaps.
Thank you to Arlene and Kate Robertson, and of course to Heather Edwards for chairing our Q&A session. So we are now at the end of today's online conference. It has been a pleasure for myself George and Heather to chair, and we hope everyone has enjoyed it and will take away some of the learning from today. I know I have certainly learned a lot today, and would like to thank everyone for their contributions.
We'd like to thank all of our speakers and all of our panel members today. We are very grateful for all the work you are doing and for taking the time to join us today. Thanks to the Life Changes Trust for hosting this event and for continuing to support local communities to create better lives, and long may that great support continue.
We will email everyone with a link to the recording of this webinar, as well as other useful information that has come out of today's conference in a week or so. Thank you all for supporting the conference. I hope it has got you all thinking about how we can create better lives in the future.
So all that's left for us to say really is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me. Thank you.